A game that's nearly impossible to call. It would take a fool to attempt to call it, and yet that's what we're here to do today. There's one thing about this game, New Zealand versus Canada, the semi-final of the 2025 Rugby World Cup, that you can take for granted. And that one thing is that it's going to be a belter. It's going to be one of the games of the year. The things that I think make great Rugby World Cup games are obviously drama. We know that we'll have that. It's number 2 versus number 3 in the world. That's a guarantee. Number 2, intensity. Now, I think this makes a game disproportionately brilliant. You look at, for instance, one of my favourite rugby games of all time is the 2011 Rugby World Cup final. That was a really low scoring game, but the intensity was so through the roof. It was two teams playing their absolute best, and also panicking quite a lot, as both teams did. Even just looking back to like France-Ireland last week, again, both teams panicked a lot, both teams made a lot of errors, but the intensity was so high that it just guaranteed the game was going to be good. And the third one is speed. The speed of this game is honestly dead set to be through the roof, to be one of the quickest games of rugby you've seen in your entire life, men's or women's. And we're going to get into exactly why I'm so confident on all these things in a moment. But first, I just want to have a quick look at the teams. Now, I've got to say a huge thank you to friend of the channel, Alice Soper, who put up this graphic earlier in the week demonstrating the changes in the two teams compared to earlier in the year when these two played in the Pacific Four, which ended up as a draw in that game, a high-scoring draw. Now, looking at the Canadian side of things, there are a couple of slight upgrades and one major upgrade. One of them is that Taylor Perry, who has been on exceptional form, has come in the place of Claire Gallagher at fly half. Taylor Perry has kept that 10 shirt all World Cup long. As Robbie has pointed out, Robbie, who is sadly not here next to me today, he's barely slept. He's had about 3 hours sleep in the last like 3 or 4 days or something at this point, and that's not an exaggeration. Anyway, as Robbie has pointed out many times, Claire Gallagher is yet to get a minute in this World Cup because Kevin Ruwe clearly has a policy that if you play well in the shirt, you keep it for the next week. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Fabiana Forteza, who was at 7 previously, now playing 8 instead of Gabrielle Senft, with Caroline Crossley, who's been playing really well at blindside, adds a bit of dynamism to that back row, but also no matter which way around you pick this back row, it's always going to have that. And Karen Paquin making herself quite undroppable with ankle snappers at the end against Australia. And the big one, of course, comes in the form of Sophie de Goede coming into the second row. Now, the biggest upgrade that Canada have had in the last 3 years when they made the semi-finals again and sadly lost to England in a really tight-fought contest. The main difference is that they've somehow managed to get de Goede into a position where she can play every position at once. We already spoke about this try that she set up for Adria Hogan-Rochester, where she essentially plays in an extra scrum half. She also made this break early in the game against Australia. They clearly trust her to just do literally what she wants on a rugby pitch because she's kind of incapable of screwing up at this point, whilst also being able to get an extra carrier in the back row. The most incredible thing about Sophie de Goede this year is not that she's recovered early from an ACL injury, like she was still meant to be injured at this point. She was not meant to be back for this World Cup. But the fact that she somehow played even better playing in the second row than she already was as a number 8, but it does just grant you her as an extra rugby player. Like, we can debate endlessly what Sophie de Goode's best position is, but her best position is on a rugby pitch. So you look at this play right here, where what it looks like is going to happen is, because Sophie Goode's positionless, essentially, she is ready to run an arc line on the outside of Justine Peltier here. It's something that when ran effectively, especially with wingers, it can cause a lot of line breaks. But Canada slightly invert the playbook here because Australia have their eyes up. They know that de Goode's the sort of woman you always need to keep your eyes on. So she inverts it. She has some kind of call in her head that clearly just means Peltier, take 3 steps to your right and I will run on your inside instead. Because de Goede has spotted that Leanie here is covering both the guard and bodyguard position, i.e. the first 2 players out from the breakdown on this side. Australia have a load more defenders on this side who could jam in if they spot de Goede running this arced line, and they have that time to adjust whilst the ball is physically in the air, whilst de Goode's waiting to catch it. But instead, players can't fold all the way around this breakdown, so Peltier takes one for the team, stepping out, feeding de Goede on the inside and making the clean break. And I guess it's the duality of Sophie de Goede that makes her such a world-class, exceptional player. You look at this try that she scored in their opening game against Fiji, where she goes from being a potential front lifter to instead taking the ball as an extra scrum half over the top and crashing over herself. She is both a strike runner and a distributor at the same time. And obviously there's plenty of these players that exist in rugby, but not many second rows who are such credible threats in this way. Many players that we talk about in this way are centres or wingers or fullbacks, but this one being a second row has such a huge knock-on effect to the team around her. Here, she takes this line out and drops the ball off the top to O'Donnell. However, it's what Canada do after this that's really impressive. They pile in this front forward pod into the actual pushing pod, let's call it, apart from de Goede. When the maul starts moving forward, they don't send de Goede in any rush because of this duality. Instead, she stands off. She holds this blind side as an extra distributor. Again, most teams would use their fly half or their fullback to flash around in this role, even their scrum half, right? But in the time it takes for somebody to physically run around there, the defence can put their eyes up, watch it and move somebody, right? Instead, what de Goede does here is she just lingers, and they know that realistically she can get the ball in and out of her hands and unleash Alicia Corrigan down this wing. What Australia have to do is respect that and watch her and leave somebody out of the maul. And it's only when the maul starts to slow down that de Goede actually commits and gives them that second wind. The referee hasn't called to use it yet, so they can just keep marching forward. And that they do. It's all cause and effect from the fact that de Goede can be a ball player, and Australia have to stand off and anticipate the fact that that could end up happening. If they put all 8 forwards into this maul, fine, no worries, they're probably stopping it, it's 8 against 7. But instead, because de Goode's a potential extra fly half and also a second row, that freakish nature gains Canada 7 points here because, yeah, she converts the try herself. Going back to that graphic previously posted, on the New Zealand side of things, there's a handful of changes, but again, none of them exactly downgrades. You look at a bit of a tactical change rather than necessarily an upgrade or a downgrade. At the back with Renee Holmes, who's been on outstanding form this World Cup, is one of the primary kickers, not just for New Zealand, but just in this World Cup generally. Coming in at fullback, shifting Braxton Sorensen-McGee onto the right wing in the place of Aisha Leti-Iinga. Stacey Waka for Amy Duplessis is by the by. Tanya Kanulivale coming in for Vaisena Mahukariti Vakalelu is kind of to be expected because the Black Ferns are the sort of team who rotate that tight end position quite a lot. And the big one, of course, comes in the form of Georgia Miller's absence. Obviously, Georgia Miller has been one of the most fiery players in this World Cup. She's been so exciting to watch. We've talked before on this channel about how she plays simultaneously as a forward and a back, and it's just sensational. The thing about this is, if it was Sophie de Goede who was lost, I would probably be looking at this and going, this is the Black Ferns game. But when it's New Zealand's star player that's gone, I don't quite feel the same way. Because in comes Kennedy Tokuafu, the co-captain for New Zealand. Now, she's an incredibly different player from Miller. She probably won't be scoring tries from 50+ metres, but she does bring A, leadership, which is invaluable in semi-finals, and B, a credible breakdown threat. She's brilliant over the ball and such a good defensive player as well. Honestly, the one thing that New Zealand will lose in losing Georgia Miller is the bullshit factor, right? It is, for fans of the men's game, similar to like when France lost Antoine Dupont and brought in Maxime Lucu. You still have a brilliant player in there who's technically so good at executing the game plan they want to play, but obviously Maxime Lucu doesn't run through people 3 times his size and just randomly score tries from 70 metres at will. You know, that's the difference between Miller and Tokuafu here. However, the main thing that I think this matchup boils down to is speed of ball for Canada. We've talked a lot before about how they have the quickest ruck speed of any team in international rugby, men's or women's, versus speed of, well, pretty much everything else for the Black Ferns. The one thing that they will both match each other on, though, is speed of thought. We've talked about de Goede and those lines she was running and the way that Canada can bake not just de Goede, but so many of their playmakers, of which there are several in both the forward pack and the back line, into great positions where they can get on the front foot and they can offload. The thing about the Black Ferns is everything they seem to do seems purely instinctive. And this isn't to say they don't have great set plays and attacking plays and structures and so on. Of course they do. They've got boundless numbers of them. But so much of this boils down to the fact New Zealand know how to just draw in a player and pass better than any other country in the world. It's just a fact of rugby for some strange reason. Like this set play they ran against Ireland off the final kickoff of the game, leading to the Maya Joseph try, sending Teresa Setefano out the boot, getting Aisha Litiyiinga to run through the gap and setting up the try from here. Broken field scenarios are what they're trying to create at all times. Now, they run the exact same play here against South Africa, and South Africa do a pretty good job defending it on first phase. Like they managed to get their woman to ground and set up from there. The issue then comes on the second phase because they've had to scramble a little bit to get this, even though they're in the opposition 22. New Zealand instinctively know that just by running this move, they will stretch the South African defence. And so Georgia Ponsonby here at the head position of this arrowhead is really smart around this, because most teams, as a rule of thumb, try and set up their kind of third player outside that guard and bodyguard position that we ran about earlier to line up against the first woman or man who may carry the ball. What Ponsonby does instead, knowing how wide this South African line is, she lines up against the fourth in Lendelwa Gwala here, knowing there's a huge gap between her and Babalwa Latcha on her outside. And so she just tips it on, giving Kuiper Olsen-Baker essentially 2 1v1 carries rather than a 1v2 carry. And Olsen-Baker is a world-class runner with the ball. She will always break loose tackles on her, and that's exactly what she does from here. Now, they get in behind. Briandre Dolph does a good job to close off the space and make the tackle here. But obviously, when the fullbacks come up to make the tackle, that means there's a knock-on effect of loads of space in behind. So Maya Joseph, super sharp to this. Again, pure instinctive, whacks it in behind. Braxton Sorensen-McGee is the first to the ball. And once again, it is a race of who can get to the try line, which New Zealand win. Alana Bremner runs a really unselfish line. I really like this, because just by standing close to the breakdown, she is just tying in all the defenders around there. She's got eyes on her. She's the first woman that they have to mark. And sure, Joseph's probably not going to pass to her. It's not particularly good play, but they have to mark it, because if she does, she's running in. And instead, everyone else can then just blend around Ruahai Demant, who is the string puller of this New Zealand team. Olsen-Baker can, again, just race into that gap, spot which gap is about to open up, because for some reason, Demant as a fly half always manages to draw in 2 players at least. And she tips it on, Olsen-Baker scores the try. That's what they can do when there's a bit of structure to their play. But you can't guarantee that's going to be the case for even much of the Canada game. There's going to be so many loose scenarios, and that is where the Black Ferns really thrive. You look here off turnover ball, which is one of their favourite areas to play off. There is this huge misconception in rugby about always wanting to run onto the ball. It's not true. You don't always want to run onto the ball when there is pre-existing space elsewhere, nowhere near the ball, which is 100% what happens here. Ruahai Demant and Stacey Walker both just stand where they are and pass the ball, because they don't need to draw anybody in. Everybody's already drawn to them. There's loads of players already around them. And by the time Renee Holmes catches the ball, who does want to run onto the ball, they've already taken out 8 players with just 2 passes. And now that Renee Holmes is actually running forward with a bit of pace, she can just draw in Samboya and pass to Woodman Whitcliffe, who can draw in Mpupa and pass to Letiyiinga. And that feeds into the other subplot that I don't think we've really seen too much of from the Black Ferns just yet, which is their kicking game. Obviously, Ruahai Demant and Renee Holmes both have a huge boot on them. They can relieve pressure really well, which is the primary reason why they, or frankly anybody, kicks. However, one thing that I imagine Ricky Flutie, as their attack coach, has really been drilling into them is their use of kicking as an attacking weapon, or attacking as a territorial weapon. We talked about Maya Joseph there on the front foot, putting the ball in behind and then gathering it immediately. You look at this example, Aisha Letiyiinga is not even on the screen at this point. She's held her width that well. Ayanda Malinga, obviously as a winger, is going to come up into the line and try and cover all of this, probably on a drift defence. So instead, Braxton Sorensen-McGee spies loads of space in behind and whacks it downfield. It bounces. Now, rugby balls famously aren't kind when they bounce, so Alana Bremner can get up and regather the ball. They then play off this, and they do score off this a few phases later, just from having insane catch-pass skills. So I guess the counter question to that becomes, what do Canada do in response to this kicking game? Because I can only assume that because the New Zealand attack, it's a given, it's going to be good, it's going to be setting to width, it's going to be fast. What can Canada do off the back of that to generate this fast ball that they famously love to play off? And one of their kind of I want to say secret weapons of this World Cup, it kind of got outed on day one when she scored 6 tries, is Julia Shale at fullback. She is such a composed manager of the backfield, always makes really good decisions when she's got the ball, which is why this example came as such a surprise to me, because this is at best an incredibly speculative pass. But it pays off. I think what she's doing here is she's clearly seen that Fredericks has gotten a little bit ahead of the ball. So there's got to be some space there somewhere, right? It's a shortcut to get in behind the defence without really needing to do anything. And it looks like this pass is probably meant to go to O'Donnell, but it's got this weird glitch where it just magnetises into Sophie de Goody's hands, which is never a bad thing. She fixes a woman brilliantly. She can shift it onto Crossley, who in turn gives it to Flo Simons, who does brilliantly here. Never slowing down to execute this 2v1, just changing direction but still staying at full pace to put Alicia Corrigan into the corner for a brilliant finish. The number of subplots to this game are honestly pretty well endless. For Canada, it's all about generating that quick ruck speed. And on the New Zealand side of things, it is simply executing everything better than their opponents do. Now, another thing I forgot to mention earlier when talking about Kennedy Tukuafu is there is an argument that she would be better than Georgia Miller for this specific game, because slowing down breakdowns is part of what makes her so good. And if she can take Canada from 2-second rucks to 3-second rucks, that might be all they need for New Zealand to get back on side and to fly off the line there, because that's what really, really suits them. As I say, it's speed of ruck versus speed of everything else. New Zealand have the most instinctive rugby team, as I've said 1,000 times here, and some of the most incredible athletes in the world at the moment. If they can get the ball to the likes of Braxton, Sorensen, McGee out wide, there will be tries. But from a Canadian perspective, there are 2 things they need to do to stop them with this. One of them is starve them of the ball. It's something that Canada have done brilliantly so far this World Cup, is just keep the ball themselves, only kick when there is definite space down there. And the second one, I suspect, will be holding up New Zealand in tackles. Slowing the ball down, not necessarily in the breakdown, but stopping it from getting to a ruck in the first place. This is something the likes of Courtney O'Donnell and Caroline Crossley are so good at, really physical players that they've got in this pack. But what we can guarantee, going back to the original point, both teams' physicality will be insane. Both teams' speed will be incredible, because we're looking at maybe 2 of the only teams in international rugby here with 15 genuine playmakers across the whole park. I can't think of many teams, men's or women's, who could say that about themselves, and that they actively like to use them and play in that kind of manner. And 3, it will be impossible to keep up with. I anticipate when we're making our video looking back at this game, we will need to watch it back genuinely 4 or 5 times, because both of these teams have so much detail in their attack, whether intended or not. Certainly in the Black Ferns case, it's near impossible to call. This Canadian team are the kind that thrive when they're in pressurised circumstances. The Black Ferns are famously the greatest cup rugby team of all time. There's not much we can say for certain will happen in this game, but the one thing to package that all up that we do know is it's going to be a belter.